2 months ago, I barely knew what ADHD was. 2 weeks ago, I was officially diagnosed with it. I feel like this is not at all an unusual story. I'm 29 years old, I'm a woman, I think this is happening to loads of people at the moment. So just thought I'd talk you through what made me think I might have ADHD, how I went about getting the assessment and the diagnosis, and what things look like for me now moving forwards. I'm making this video in the hopes that you might find it useful. I've been watching a lot of these and I found that they've really helped. So I guess for a bit of background, like I've always thought of myself, and I'm sure other people have thought of me too, as quite a chaotic person. I have always lost things a lot. I've lost passports, I've lost them in buses, in the street, I've lost them at school, I've lost them in my house, I've lost phones, I've broken phones. I miss things that I really want to do because I've forgotten about the appointment, or I haven't written it down somewhere, or I don't know. I'm flaky, I'm a bit of a flaky friend. My friends have said this about me. It's something I'm not happy with about myself. This is something I've read loads of other people talking about. It's definitely something they asked about in the assessment, but like school. School was difficult, challenging. I was very competent, but the main reason this school was difficult was like, I never had the right stuff. I never did my homework. I never knew where anything was. My school bag was just mulch, like pieces of paper. Once I found a banana skin in there, and I have no idea how long it was in there for, but like just stuff, like crap in a bag, and I would just throw everything in and assume that I would find it later, and I never would. I never knew whether my books were in my locker or at home or in the car or like left on a school bus somewhere hurtling towards the bus station. I've left laptops on buses. I spent a lot of time in detention. I think this is probably familiar to loads of people. It wasn't that I was naughty necessarily, maybe I was a bit naughty. Mostly it was just that I was scatterbrained. Might be the nice way to put it. Yeah, but I don't think it was that, it's not that I wasn't likeable. I think like I got along well with people for the most part. My teachers liked me again for the most part, but I didn't seem to be able to fulfill these like things that needed to happen to be able to survive and thrive, which were like turning up to the right class at the right time with the right stuff. Basic. Couldn't do it. I've also always constantly started things that I can't finish or don't finish or won't finish. Hobbies, like, this is a really good example. I'm not even going to show you, I'm too embarrassed, but during lockdown I was like, I need a hobby, cross stitch. So rather than starting out with a cross stitch this big, I bought a cross stitch this big of the like a huge section of the Bayeux tapestry in like real size. Anyway, did I finish it? No. Did I start it? Yes. I did about 2 days on it and then gave up. I spilt fake tan on it, it looked really bad. That's a classic. Projects all the time. I don't know what projects. Moving furniture around in a room. I'm like, yes, burst of enthusiasm. Get started, get halfway through, get distracted by something and leave it. And then my life is chaos and a mess. Simultaneously though, whilst I was living in this absolute chaos and frustrating everybody around me all the time, I was also in some ways really successful and getting along really well. I was smart at school, I got good grades, I took extra GCSEs and extra A-levels, not because anybody put any pressure on me, but because I wanted to. I was constantly badgering my parents to let me learn more languages, go to more classes, have more tutoring. I was always trying to find stuff to do to like fill my brain. I taught myself how to write the phonetic alphabet or the Cyrillic alphabet. I spent a lot of time learning poetry by heart. I got into a good university. I passed with a 2-1. I'm still not quite sure how I did that, but it happened. I scraped it. We got there. Now I'm 29 years old. I have a great job that I love. I've had a lot of great jobs that I love. I've also run lots of successful social media projects. Alongside it, I get a lot done. I'm a productive person. The two things, or the two parts of me never really seem to add up. There's this like competent person who's doing lots of stuff really successfully and looks like maybe she's breezing through life. And then there's this really chaotic person who is unable to do like basic tasks that you need to do to live like a nice life. Things like, yeah, tidying and washing up. Like why? It just didn't make sense to me. Recently I noticed that a bunch of influencers who I follow over on Instagram were talking about either suspected ADHD or having an ADHD diagnosis, taking ADHD medication, and ADHD seemed to kind of come onto my radar as something that could be applied to somebody like me, i.e. like a woman in her 20s. In my head before, like when I pictured ADHD, it was like a naughty white boy at school, like who couldn't sit still in his class and was struggling to pay attention to the teacher. Like I didn't really see how that applied to like most of the people who I see out there in the world. Turns out that's a really limited understanding of ADHD and not really how it works, but in my brain I just couldn't really, I never really thought of ADHD as having anything to do with me or people like me. But as I saw more and more people online talking about their own experiences of ADHD, it sort of filtered into my consciousness. And I started learning more about what ADHD is, the problems with attention and hyperactivity, but also some of the quirks that like people would talk about that I was like, yeah, like maybe I really identify with that. In some ways, I am really organized, right? Like I make lists of everything. My whole life is run by lists. Spreadsheets, absolutely love a spreadsheet. Like you name it, I've got a spreadsheet for it. I totally overuse the notes section on my phone, but like in a great way. It really helps me function as like an extra brain in my pocket. But I've got so many notes in there that every now and again it gets full and I have to go back through and like delete everything because I've just overused it. It's also complete chaos in there. I don't know if this resonates with you, but like my partner can't believe it because the top of the note will be like our weekly food shopping list, and then the middle of the note will be like a password for something like my bank account or something, then the bottom of the note will be like some notes from a meeting I was in or a phone call, and then like somebody's contact details. And it works for me, like I find the things that I need but it's obviously a coping mechanism that I've developed to deal with some of the shortcomings in my brain. So these were the kinds of things that had been coming to light that were making me suddenly think maybe ADHD could be something that applied to me. So yeah, over the last couple of months, I guess my sort of curiosity about what ADHD was peaked, at the same time as like some of the struggles that I've always been having in my day-to-day life and found ways to cope with became a bit more difficult to manage and then really came to the forefront. So it was kind of this perfect storm. So I started talking to my partner about it. He was like, yeah, this has legs. This idea is not ridiculous. Maybe you do have ADHD. It would answer a lot of things. And outside of the big issues about like work and organization and not being able to make an insurance claim on time, you know, the things that were having a big impact in my life, he also came up with some observations about how I was in the house that really pointed to the ADHD thing as well. They're things that I've seen loads of people with ADHD talk about. Like, I'm sure if you're also thinking you might have ADHD, these might resonate with you too. It's things like I'm constantly doing at least two things at once. So in the evenings, if we sit down to like relax and watch TV, I'm not just like on my phone fiddling with stuff. I'm trying to learn something, or I'm creating something, I'm making content. I am not just like lazily replying to DMs, but like methodically, systematically replying to my DMs, trying to get through as many as possible while I'm watching this thing. And it's not, you know, to him, it doesn't look relaxing. I wake up in the morning and my brain is at 100% immediately. Within 30 seconds of waking up, I'm thinking about organizational stuff. I'm thinking about our personal finances. I'm thinking about what I need to do that day, what we've got on that evening, thinking about how I'm going to solve a problem at work. He wakes up like a normal person, needs a bit of time to like have some coffee and get to grips with the world before we launch into like discussing like our savings. It does make for some jarring mornings where I'm trying to put the world to rights and he's like, can you please leave me alone? I have literally just woken up. So I think all of that made him think, and made me think when he pointed it out, okay, time perhaps to look into getting an assessment. Now I went private for my assessment, which I know lots of people do. I also know lots of people aren't able to do. I did that for a couple of reasons. One is that, as you might already know, I've had various mental health issues in my life that I've had treatment and therapy for, and I've always had that, almost always had that privately. I've been really lucky to have been covered by health insurance and then to have been able to use my savings for some things. I also, the more I read, the more I learned, the more I listened to other people's experiences, I realised that the NHS is, as we know, chronically underfunded and struggling, especially in primary care. The waiting list for an ADHD assessment can be really long, like 2 years long, 3 years long. And as a clinically impulsive person, I felt like I would rather spend the money and have the private assessment and just have an answer. So I went online and started researching places. There are quite a lot of them that do private ADHD assessment and treatment in the UK. It cost me £500 to have the assessment and a note sent to my GP. And it took a week from ringing them up to having the assessment and getting my diagnosis. So the first thing I did was went onto their website, and they had a sort of online assessment form where you basically just went through, answered a bunch of questions as truthfully as you could. At the end, it sort of came up and said, sounds like you might have ADHD. So I carried on through the process and booked myself an assessment. There were a few things that they asked me to do before the actual assessment. One is they sent me a little blood pressure monitor machine, like one of those cuffs that goes over your arm. And they asked me to measure my blood pressure, my heart rate, my weight, and my height. Personally, because I've had struggles with food, weighing myself was actually a bit of a challenge. Don't have any weighing scales in the house. Went to Boots, theirs weren't working. I had to do it at somebody's house, but it was worth it, I think. Also, the reason they ask for your height and your weight, my understanding is that that's for the medication and nothing to do with the kind of diagnostic process. So it might be that you don't need to fill those in unless you're looking for treatment. So if you're worried that that's a barrier for you, I would say go for it anyway. Then the next thing they ask you to do is answer some further questions, like submit written answers and upload any documents that you think might be useful. The kinds of things that they ask you for are school reports, feedback from managers at work. I personally sat down with my partner and we had a conversation about what we thought might be possible symptoms of ADHD, and we submitted those. But yeah, basically just more background information that they can have a look at before the assessment to try and get an idea of who you are and how you are coping in the world. And then finally there's an assessment. It's an hour and a half long, and they basically ask you a whole ton of questions. She asked me a lot about my childhood, what I was like at home, what I was like at school, university, work. She asked me about things like hobbies and reading, and just built up, I guess, over an hour and a half, a picture of how my brain was working and some of the struggles I was facing. And they kind of measure you against, I think, like 3 broad diagnostic criteria. I might be wrong about this, but I think it's basically like hyperactivity, impulsivity, and attention. Anyway, we got to the end of the hour and a half. I was like, do you think I have ADHD? And she was like, yes. Part of me was kind of worried by that point. I was thinking, like, what if she doesn't diagnose me with ADHD and it's not ADHD? And then I'm like back to the drawing board with this really weird set of symptoms and I don't know what I'm doing. But I hope that they would have been able to help me with that as well. I've heard lots of other people say this, but I have had lots of contact with psychiatrists, therapists, the mental health system in general. I was kind of surprised that this had never come up. My mum said the same thing. She was like, how has nobody spotted this before? But it is like chronically underdiagnosed, especially in women, and it got missed. So that's just a thing. And if you think about like somebody like me who's had so much contact with the system and nobody ever suggested that it might be ADHD or that I might have ADHD. Like imagine what it's like if you have no contact with the system. Nobody's ever going to work it out. So anyway, it makes me feel a bit upset. Like the whole thing is obviously broken, but it's good. The more we learn, the more empowered we are. A diagnosis at 29 is still kind of great. Trying not to think too much about like what my life could have been like if I'd had my ADHD diagnosis before. But starting from now, these are the things that I hope it might change for me going forwards, and how. First of all, I know already it's helped me to understand myself better, and that is unbelievably valuable, I think. Firstly, because it breeds self-compassion. I used to be really hard on myself for being scatty and losing things and being like careless with my stuff and other people's stuff. I used to think that maybe I was just like, I used to think I was lazy, that maybe I was like spoiled and I didn't value material things because I would lose them even though I really loved them and didn't lose them on purpose. But I can let all of that stuff go. Like I know now that I'm not a lazy person. I just struggle with executive function. So I look forward to going easier on myself, starting from like yesterday. As well as helping me understand myself, I think it will help my partner and my family and the people in my life to understand me better as well. And I think that will be great, like how good. My partner is already saying as well that like he's been doing research about what it feels like to live with somebody with ADHD, and he's like, yes, that's exactly what it feels like. Nice for him to be able to find people who are having the same experiences, the same frustrations. And he's already doing some research into how to support me, but also how to protect his boundaries himself and not just end up doing the lion's share of the housework and the washing up. So I think that would be really interesting. Watch this space. It's gonna help me find tools that can help me, especially with my like executive function, like managing my time, turning up in the right place at the right time, organizing myself. And at work, like I've already started practicing some stuff, some tools, some techniques, and I think it's gonna make a world of difference. So that is definitely something to look forward to. It's gonna help me to ask for things that I need. Like once I understand what my needs are, what the specific challenges that I'm facing are, then I will be able to ask people for the things that I need to help me. And that is as true at home as it is at work, in social situations. I think it can help just take some of the friction out of things. And who doesn't want that? And lastly, I really struggle to relax. This is definitely an ADHD thing. I know you know what I'm talking about. Relaxing is a real struggle. Like as soon as I have a bit of spare time, I fill it with stuff. I'm doing stuff. I'm making stuff. And just like zoning out a bit will be really good. Somehow finding ways to try and switch off a few of the different channels in my brain. Just maybe have one channel going at once. That would be revolutionary. Maybe being able to watch a film without doing other stuff at the same time. Like I'm not talking about extreme relaxation, but just like dialing it all down a little bit. I hope I'm gonna find ways to do that. Keep your fingers crossed for me, guys. So the first thing that's gonna happen, and that's gonna happen in the next few days, is that I have been prescribed medication. The drug I've been prescribed is called Elvanse. I need to do a bit of research because I don't really know what to expect. I am a little bit nervous about it, but it's a drug that you take daily, and it's been described to me as being like a pair of glasses, in that when you take it, it helps you navigate the world around you better, but it's not having a long-term impact on your brain. Like it works when you take it. On the days where you don't take it, there's no effect at all. So the plan is that I'll be doing that from this week. And I will be documenting it. I intend to vlog the first week and come back and chat about it, because again, that's something that I've been watching lots of other people's videos about, and I hope that somebody might find it useful. I also think that it might help me to process some of the changes that are happening, if they are happening, and to understand just the ways that it's affecting me and whether I like it or not. So don't forget to subscribe if you want to find out how that journey goes. Also, if you've watched this whole thing but we're in fact looking for the other Jess the dog, my dog, the Worried Whippet, she's over on her own channel now. I hope you're good and that you found this helpful. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments. I am an open book. I'm also over on Instagram at human.jess. I love getting a little DM, so do come and say hello. And yeah, check back in a week or so and see how I get on my first week of Elvanse. Bye.